You are listening to continuing coverage of the trial of Chad Daybell from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast. Let's go back to the courtroom.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right. Good morning, everyone. We are back on the record on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. The jury is not present at this time. The court took under advisement separate motions yesterday relating to victim designations, as well as 2 motions in limine, and set aside time this morning to make rulings on the record on those motions. So I'll note the defendant is present, as well as defense counsel, the state present as well, prosecutors, and the court resolved the victim matter on the record yesterday. I do have rulings as it relates to the motions in limine this morning. So, again, there were 2 motions filed, one on March 4th, one on March 14th by the state seeking introduction of statements that may be hearsay or may not. That's what was argued in the motion, and whether or not they'd be admissible. In terms of what is hearsay or is it hearsay, the Idaho Rules of Evidence define hearsay as a statement, oral or written, other than one made by the declarant while testifying at the trial or hearing, offered in evidence to prove the truth of the matter asserted. That quotes Idaho Rule of Evidence 801 A and C, and from a case Sandoval Tana 138 Idaho 911. The evidence has been objected to by the defense, and so there's a question for the court to resolve of whether or not this is inadmissible hearsay. There are general exceptions to some of the hearsay statements that are in the rules, and the court has to analyze those, looking at rules 802, 803, and 804. And then so the court has to first determine whether statements are in fact hearsay, and second, whether there's any exception that allows them to be admitted. So the first matter we'll take up is the statement requested by the state in the first motion in limine filed March 4th. That is a statement of Janice Olson, and the state seeks to introduce an out-of-court statement made by Tammy Daybell to a coworker and friend, Janice Olson, somewhere around 6 weeks before the time Tammy Daybell passed away. The statement that the state seeks to introduce is quoted in the motion. That was a statement Tammy allegedly made to Janice Olson. Quote, she would just, I'll read that again, quote, she would, comma, she'd just say, comma, my husband thinks I should up my insurance here at the end of my, comma, at the end of my career, comma, before I retire. He's thinking I should up my insurance. The state seeks to introduce that statement, has argued that a exception would apply permitting that under Rule 803.3, and under 803.3, that allows for statements that are citing from the rule, then existing mental, emotional, or physical conditions. And the state's argued that these would fit within a physical condition statement, talking about the health of Tammy Daybell at the time, and the state arguing that her health is something that goes to the statement, bringing it within 803.3 for that part of the exception, which does allow a statement such as bodily health is what's included in the rule, and a statement of the declarant's then existing physical condition. The defense argued against it, saying it simply talks about a financial decision that was being discussed and does not fit within 803.3. The court did some research on the issue in 803. There's a case, State of Idaho versus Garcia, 102 Idaho 378, and talks about when 803.3 may apply. Talks about 4 areas. One, claims when there's claims of self-defense as a justification for killing. That would not apply here. 2 is if there's a defense around a suicide allegation, that would not apply here. 3 claims killing was accidental, which there's no evidence that's in the theory of the case of either party here. And then 4, when a specific mens rea is in issue. That specific mens rea issue in the conspiracy could be considered. However, upon weighing things out, both under 803.3 and also under Rule 403, the court finds the statement is problematic for a few reasons. Number one, just reading through the statement again and precisely what the statement is, this talks about Tammy saying, quote, "My husband thinks I should up my insurance at the end of my career before I retire." And so, first of all, there's an issue there with when that would occur. There's some vagueness there. The testimony in the record so far is that Tammy had not worked at the school all that long, a couple of years. There's no indication she was preparing for or nearing retirement. And this statement that insurance should be upped, quote, before she retires or at the end of her career, I think makes the statement vague as it would relate to evidence in this case. Also, under 803.3, I don't find that this fits in one of those exceptions as the state has argued. It's not a statement about physical health. It's, I think, in the context here would agree with the defense that it's really a statement about a financial decision. And so based on that analysis, the court is going to exclude the statement on the motion in limine. The state would not be permitted to introduce that statement in the state's case in chief, as I would find it would be impermissible hearsay. However, that does not rule out it potentially coming in later, either in the form of impeachment or if somehow the defense were to open the door to make the statement again relevant for impeachment or other purposes. So that's going to be the ruling as to the state's first motion in limine, denying the motion without prejudice to have it re-raised if it comes up in either impeachment or from the door being opened by the defense. The next motion had 2 separate statements that were sought to be introduced. And this is the March 14th motion. The first statement is a statement where Tammy Daybell told Janet Anderson that Chad had told Tammy, quote, "she is a zombie." And the state indicates that statement was made sometime late August up until October of 2019. So there's multiple layers of this statement. What Chad said to Tammy, Tammy said to Janet. When the court has gone through the analysis of this, it may be permissible on Chad's statement under statement of a party opponent or under Rule 801 D2B. That part may not be hearsay. However, then Tammy telling it to Janet, I think clearly does become hearsay when you get into the multiple layers of the statement there. The issue the court has in addition there is the timing, quite frankly, of the disclosure, noting and agreeing with what the state argued that sometimes even on the stand, witnesses will suddenly say things they hadn't reported to officers, and it's still maybe credible and truthful, and the jury can decide that. However, in this case, looking at the fact that it is a hearsay statement, apparently this witness was interviewed first about 4 years ago, May of 2020, and then the statement just came up in March of 2024, almost 4 years later. That is a concern. Further, the actual statements and how they were made were, the brief said, were attached as an Exhibit B to the motion. And to the court's knowledge, I don't have Exhibit B, so I just don't know exactly what was being said. But looking at the multiple layers of hearsay here, I don't find that it's fitting in any exception to allow its admission in the state's case in chief. And also, I think it's problematic, the timing of when the statement occurred and was disclosed. And so the court is going to preclude the admission of that statement from Janet Anderson about, quote, she is a zombie. Also noting that the statement, even when it was made, at least according to the motion, was sometime over a 3 or 4 month period, which again, I think goes to the credibility of the statement of the court weighing out whether or not this would be a statement that would be more probative than unfairly prejudicial under a 403 balancing. So the court is going to exclude that statement from Janet Anderson. Again, though, it may become admissible in impeachment or if the defense somehow opens the door to bring that back in. But in terms of the state's case in chief, it won't be permitted to be brought in as being inadmissible hearsay. The last statement in the second part of the March 14th motion in limine relates to a statement that the state seeks to introduce from a witness, Pam Peebles, who was a coworker with Tammy Daybell, and the statement that Tammy told her, quote, "This is the best I have ever felt in my life," and that, quote, she was excited about getting ready for a race. That's a statement purported to have been made 2 days before Tammy's death. The court does find that that particular statement, I think, clearly fits within 803.3, which allows an exception to hearsay for a then existing mental, emotional, or physical condition. The statement of the declarant's then existing physical condition, such as bodily health, is permitted, and that is a statement clearly about her health and would fall within the 803.3 exception. And also on a 403 balancing, its probative value is not outweighed by unfair prejudice. This is an issue that's already been raised by other witnesses, and a defense has crossed those witnesses, also further bringing up the issue of what was Tammy's health at the time before she died. The statement's also made in a narrow enough time frame to make it relevant as well, so the court will permit the statement from Pam Peebles if the state wishes to introduce that in its case in chief. So those are the rulings on each of those three evidentiary matters. Does the state have any questions on the rulings? Mr. Wixom? Any questions from the defense?
No, Judge. Thank you for your time and effort in this matter.
Okay, thank you. We'll just issue a very brief order referencing the court's findings on the record on those matters. So that's in the case. That'll conclude the ruling for this morning then. In terms of getting going on evidence, I'm not sure where if the jurors were coming in late, or would they be ready to be brought into the courtroom now?
Fine, they're ready to go.
Okay. If the parties are ready, we said we'd start at 9. We're a little early. Is the state okay to proceed, or do you need a minute?
I think we need a moment, Your Honor.
Okay. So you want to just start evidence at 9 o'clock?
If we could do that, Your Honor, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. And that's what I mentioned yesterday. So we'll go ahead and get on the record at 9 with further evidence. We'll take a brief recess until then. I will note to the parties also, I did receive the juror affirmations from all the jurors this morning, and they're all here and have signed their affirmations. So we'll get started at 9 o'clock.
All rise. All rise. District Court's again in session.
All right. If we could please have the jurors brought in.
All right, please. Jurors not present, counted for, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right. Good morning. We're back on the record on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Daybell. We're continuing evidence in the state's case in chief. We left off yesterday with Detective Kaya Kamanu on the stand in direct examination. I believe the state's still proceeding with more direct. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay. If you'd like to continue with testimony, Detective Kaya Kamanu is here. You can go ahead and take the stand, and we'll allow you to continue on direct. I will note also, I received all of the juror affirmations and the jury is all here properly seated. So thank you again, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, for continuing to follow the court's instructions as you retire home each night. And with that, Ms. Blake, once you're ready, you can continue with your direct.
Your Honor, may I be handed back State's Exhibit 107B?
Yes.
Detective Kaikamanu, when we left off yesterday, we had been talking about some searches linked to a Homer J. Maximus account. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you had prepared an exhibit summarizing some of the searches that you located on that account. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, I believe we left off with the state having asked permission to publish State's 107B.
Yeah, we had the tech issue. I believe and hope that's all been sorted out. They worked on it for a while, so I think we've got things working. If those monitors don't work, also please make an indication, jurors, and you can publish.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I may have just a moment, let's see if I can get this fixed. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Sorry about that. Detective Kaikamanu, does this look like the start of the PowerPoint presentation that you created?
Yes.
And can you remind the jury, who was that Homer J. Maximus account ultimately associated with?
Alex Cox.
And if we turn to the first slide, can you see the date on there?
Yes.
And what date is that?
October 8th, 2019.
And can you remind the jurors when the attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell occurred?
October 9th, 2019.
What is it about these searches on October 8th that caught your attention?
These searches, Alex Googled the 100-yard drop to 200 and 100 to 300.
And when we talk about a drop, can you explain what that is?
During shooting and sighting in your rifle with your scope, depending on how far you're out in yardage, a lot of times you will dial in that scope to a precise point of impact of your bullet. The drop of the bullet, the further you're out, the drop of the bullet tends to go down a little bit.
So essentially the idea being that from where you're standing, that's going to be where the bullet will go and where it will ultimately land or hit a target.
Correct.
And also in there, it looks like it was a 6.5 Grendel specifically.
Yes.
What kind of gun was recovered from an apartment associated with Alex Cox?
Alexander Arms 6.5 Grendel.
And then it looks like there's another date on there, October 9th of 2019. Is that correct?
Correct.
And there's some additional searches there. What about those caught your attention?
He searches just different uppers for ARs, muzzle energy brake of a 6.5 Grendel, and sizing of frog tog pants.
And breaking those down a little bit and actually going back to October 8th, was there anything else other than it being the 6.5 Grendel that stood out to you with these particular searches?
Not at this time to me, no.
And then on the October 9th, we've talked about the 6.5 Grendel. What about the frog tog sizing caught your attention?
There were some frog togs purchased on this same day at a different location.
And from your investigation, did you learn anything in relation to where those frog togs may have been purchased?
Yes.
And where was that?
Sportsman's Warehouse in Idaho Falls, Idaho.
Did you learn anything in relation or review anything in relation to where a device associated with Alex Cox was located that same day?
Yes.
And where was that?
Sportsman's Warehouse in Idaho Falls, Idaho.
Do you know what color those frog tog pants were?
Black.
And then when we go to the next slide, can you read the date of these searches into the record?
October 10th, 2019.
And can you explain what about these searches stood out to you?
On this day was after the attempted shooting on Tammy Daybell. And the next day he is searching if an AR functions in cold weather, how an AR functions in cold weather. Hornady one shot shooting in cold weather. Also had a prep your AR to shoot in cold weather. He also is searching if mag rings shrink in cold weather.
Do you reside around the Fremont County area?
I do.
Have you resided there for some time?
Yes.
What are Octobers generally like in that part of the state?
Microphone, please, Mr. Pryor.
Objection, Judge. It's calling for speculation. He's talking in generalities, and he has no testimony or knowledge of what the weather was like at any time this particular year.
Your Honor, he testified that he lives in the area and has lived there for some time. I think it would be within his
agree, and
personal knowledge.
I'll overrule.
Thank you. If you can answer.
Can you repeat that?
What are the Octobers generally like in that part of the state?
Octobers get fairly cold in that month. Sometimes prior to that month, Octobers in eastern Idaho are hit and miss.
Do you know what the temperature was on that day?
I believe it was 26 degrees.
Judge, I'd like some foundation as to how he knew that.
Ms. Blake, knowing the precise, I agree, degree temperature would require additional foundation.
Did you do anything to look into what the temperature was that day?
I did.
What did you do?
I Googled and got on to the National Weather Service and put in that date, October 9th, 2019, to see what the temperatures were during that day.
And what were the temperatures?
26 degrees.
And if we go to the next slide, can you read the date of these searches into the record?
October 12th, 2019.
What about these particular searches caught your attention?
So this was after the attempted shooting on October 9th. On this search, he's Googling how to attach a ghillie suit, a cover to a ghillie suit. He's also Googling if a 6.5 Grendel will shoot through a windshield. He Googles the penetration through Dodge Dakota, 2008 Dodge Dakota steel body thickness, the thickness on the doors of a 2008 Dodge Dakota, and the gauge thickness of, or how thick 22 gauge steel is.
And if we break these down a little bit, can you explain what a ghillie suit is?
A ghillie suit's used a lot in the military, snipers. It's a cover that they can use for cover while in the weeds, the brush, the trees, so they're not seen.
And what about a 2008 Dodge Dakota stood out?
Tammy Daybell and Chad Daybell had a 2004 Dodge Dakota registered to them.
And again, a 6.5 Grendel was recovered from an apartment associated with Alex Cox?
Correct.
As part of your investigation, did you also look at some shooting range records?
I did.
Do you recall which shooting range you reviewed records from?
It was a sportsman's club located in St. Anthony, Idaho.
And Your Honor, I have what's been marked as States Exhibit 396 and 396A. Your Honor, I just handed the bailiff a courtesy copy for defense counsel, a copy for the court, and a courtesy copy for Your Honor.
All right.
And Detective Kaikamano, if you just look through those particularly Exhibit 396A. And Your Honor, while he's looking through those, I believe these are a stipulated to exhibit. The first Exhibit 396 would be the affidavit of business records, and Exhibit 396A would be the actual logs.
That is correct, Judge.
All right. Those have been offered now and admitted. So 396 and 396A are both admitted exhibits.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
And Detective, do those appear to be the records that you reviewed?
Yes.
Were you able to determine whether or not it appeared Alex Cox had been at that gun range?
Yes.
And what did you determine?
Alex Cox didn't sign in as Alex Cox on these sheets. He did sign in as C. Quint, which C. Quint, or I should say C.P. Quint, is the license plate on his Ford F-150 truck. So on the sign-on sheet, the only letter that's missing in that is the P.
And were you able to determine how many times this C. Quint or Alex Cox had visited that gun range?
Yes.
How many times had he visited?
5 times through October 7th to the 15th of 2019.
And again, the attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell was which day?
October 9th, 2019,
And what day was Tammy Daybell pronounced dead?
October 19th, 2019.
As part of your investigation, did you also review some data recovered from a phone associated with Tammy Daybell?
I did.
And Your Honor, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 108. It is a affidavit of business records in relation to Tammy Daybell's phone.
Thank you.
Give us a moment, Ms. Blake. We're going to verify the number here. I think we've already got 108 admitted.
Your Honor, may we approach briefly?
Yes. Actually, let me have the bailiff hand you the admitted exhibit for your review. Yeah.
All right, Your Honor, I think we have sorted that out. So State's Exhibit 108 was already admitted.
Yes.
The state would ask to have the witness shown that State's Exhibit 291.
Okay.
Do you recall reviewing that particular email?
Yes, I do.
And Your Honor, there is a stipulation to admit the contents of Tammy Daybell's phone. This is one of the items retrieved from her phone. So the state would move for admission of Exhibit 291.
Any objection?
No, Judge.
All right. Exhibit 291 is admitted.
And Your Honor, the state would ask for permission to publish.
You can publish.
And Detective, are you able to see who sent this email?
Yes.
And who was that?
Tammy Daybell from tammy.daybell@gmail.com.
And are you able to see who it was sent to?
Yes.
And who is that?
Mark Daybell at mark.daybell@missionary.org.
And can you see the date that this shows it as having been sent?
Yes. On 10/13/2019 at 2:38, or correction, 2:23:18.
And Your Honor, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Okay. Thank you.
And Detective, this was sent just 4 days after that attempted shooting. Is that correct?
Correct.
And when we look at that second paragraph, are you able to see approximately what time Tammy says she arrived home that night?
Yes, approximately 9:15.
And are you able to see in there, actually, let me back up. Can you read the last couple sentences there, starting with, I looked up?
I looked up thinking it was Dad or Garth to help me carry stuff in. Nope. It was a guy dressed all in black with a ski mask on, pointing a rifle at me.
And Your Honor, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read. And Detective Kaikamanu, could you read the paragraph starting with, I think I was, that first full paragraph into the record?
I think I was a bit in shock because I just said, what do you think you were doing? Then I noticed the rifle was actually a paintball gun. It had a hopper on top. The guy started pulling the trigger, and I could hear the clicking and whooshing sound of an empty paintball gun. He stayed standing by the back of the car, just pulling the trigger while pointing the gun at me. For some reason, I just kept asking him what he thought he was doing. At that point, I was actually more annoyed than scared because he was standing between me and the door, and he didn't step towards me or even say anything. The scared part came after, when my brain thought of things that could have happened.
And Your Honor, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
All right.
And Detective Kaikamanu, could you read the last sentence of that second paragraph, starting with, on Thursday night?
On Thursday night, though, I didn't go to Zumba because I was quite understandably did not want to be out after dark alone.
And I'm going to go back to that paragraph that we were looking at previously. In there, Tammy refers to the paintball gun as a rifle. Is that correct?
Correct.
And she specifically references a hopper.
Yes.
And that's in reference to why she thought it was maybe a paintball gun.
Yes.
She also indicates the guy started pulling the trigger. Is that correct?
Yes.
In this, do you see where she indicates that she was scared?
Yes.
And in that last sentence that we just talked about, she indicated she was scared to go out alone the next night.
Yes.
And Your Honor, I'm going to ask to publish State's Exhibit 281A. It was admitted yesterday.
Okay. You can publish.
And Detective, we talked about this firearm yesterday. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And where was this recovered from?
This was recovered from Alex Cox's apartment.
And can you remind the jurors what type of firearm this is?
This is an Alexander Arms 6.5 Grendel.
And I think you have a pointer up there. But when we just looked at that email from Tammy, she specifically references a hopper, or what she thought might be a hopper on the firearm. Can you again explain where on this firearm, if this were a paintball gun, where the hopper would be located?
Again, like I was referencing yesterday, the scope is on the top of the rail of the gun right here. On a paintball gun, it comes off right on the side and up right there.
So the hopper would be around the same location as this scope.
Yes.
We saw some searches about drilling a baffle to make a suppressor. Can you talk a little bit about what a suppressor is?
A suppressor is a device that can be screwed onto the end of rifles, handguns, miniguns that will make the bullet coming out quiet. Sometimes people make homemade suppressors, which they have to drill holes, and you can also buy those wiggly.
Where on the firearm would you attach the suppressor?
The suppressor is attached right on the end of the barrel right there.
And Your Honor, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 281C, if I can have the detective shown a copy.
You may.
There's more to come in the trial of Chad Daybell. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage right here from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.